Afternoon, members. Good afternoon, officers, and good afternoon to all of those who joined us here this afternoon, agents, applicants, and members of the public. Again, I'm going to have to work my way through the agenda initially here. First item on the agenda, Maura, do I have to start with the notice and summons again? Yes, I think I do. Yeah, go ahead, Maura.
Yeah, members, you're hereby summoned to attend the monthly meeting of the Planning Committee, which will be hybrid socially distanced meeting to be conducted remotely in the Chamber in the Guildhall on Thursday, the 8th of September. Alderman Alan Breslin. Alderman Alan Breslin. Alderman Keith Kerrigan. Alderman Keith Kerrigan.
Here, Maura.
Thank you. Alderman Drew Thompson.
Here, Maura.
Thanks, Drew. Councillor Jason Barr. Councillor Raymond Barr.
Here, Maura.
Thank you. Councillor John Boyle.
Here.
Thank you. Councillor Angela Dobbins. Councillor Dobbins. Councillor Paul Gallagher.
And Shaw, Maura.
Thank you. Councillor Christopher Jackson.
Sure.
Thank you. Councillor Dan Kelly.
And Shaw, Maura.
Thanks, Dan. Councillor Patricia Lowe gave her apologies. Councillor Kieran Maguire. Councillor Maguire. Councillor Philip McKinney gave his apologies yesterday. And Councillor Sean Minnie.
Here.
Thank you. I'll just go back over, there's a few there. Alderman Alan Breslin.
Alderman Breslin will be in the meeting, but it could be a half past before he gets in. He's out to another business. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Angela Dobbins. Councillor Maguire. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Maura. Members, just to advise, having taken the roll call, we currently have 8 members present. That makes us quorum. Of course, if any 2 members leave, then that would leave us in quorum. The quorum for the council planning committee is 7. So just advise you all to bear that in mind. As the item 2 dealt with, and I must now do the broadcasting statement. I'd like to remind everyone present at this meeting in the Guildhall or in attendance remotely that this meeting will be broadcast live to the internet and will be capable of repeated viewing. The broadcast may be terminated or suspended in accordance with our protocol. Due to your attendance at this meeting, you're consenting to being filmed and to the use and storage of those images for broadcasting or training purposes and for the purposes of keeping historical records and making those records available to the public. Members and approved speakers are reminded to only have their microphones and cameras on while speaking at the meeting, and to use the chat facility to highlight a request to speak, and a copy of the council privacy notice will be found on the council website, which you'll find at www.derrystrabane.com. Okay. Right. Item number 4 again, declaration of members' interests. Of course, members can declare those now or through the course of the meeting. I'm assuming from yesterday that there probably aren't any, but if you feel that there are, then please do let me know. Chairperson's business. Maura, do you feel that you want to go back over that? Right, okay. So members, again, you were advised of the
various issues relating to the applications in front of us yesterday. Unless anybody feels that they want a reappraisal of that, I am content to move on, if you are. And so we will then move on to the next item on the agenda, which is back to the items for decision. And just to refresh your memories, members, the items will be taken in the following order. It will be number 6, number 7, 11, 4, 9, and 8. And so therefore we will be starting with item number 6. That's, oh, and we do have a late item, members. So I'll afford you all the opportunity to have a quick perusal of that late item. And then as soon as I'm content that you're all content, I'll ask Malachy then to present the report. So members, give me 2 or 3 minutes to have a look at that. That's a late item from Paul McGarvey, who's the agent for the applicant. Okay.
Okay, members, hopefully that's given you all enough time to consider the lead item. So item number 6 is LA 11 2021 1218/F. Malachy, I'll pass it over to you. You can take it from here.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, members. Item 6 is LA 11 2021 1218F. The application proposal is a full application for replacement metal bridge, approximately 1 metre high and 2.1 metres high green pad and security fence to the north entrance only, and the recommendation is to refuse. The application site is, as outlined in red, is a small parcel of land currently containing a storage container, which has been repurposed as a bridge. It is located off a station road along a private laneway with a public right-of-way. The lane runs parallel with the River Foyle and is separated by a grass bank flood defence wall. The container straddles a lagoon and connects to an agricultural field opposite. Within this field and in close proximity to the container bridge is an existing mobile home and also an existing concrete building and an existing turbine. Site is located within the countryside and outside any development limits and would be subject to rural planning policy. And the site is also located within a number of protected areas, including the SPA, ASSI and Ramsar designation. And as you see in the overhead image here, the location of the container bridge is outlined in white in the cursor. We have the mobile home, which is unauthorised and does not benefit from planning permission. And you have the existing right-of-way, and Station Road is located to the northwest. So this is a view of the site looking from the southwest back along the right-of-way, which runs parallel with the Foyle. You can see the existing container bridge on site, and you can also see the unauthorised turbine, an unauthorised mobile home in the same context. And these are views from the northeast. Again, along the pathway adjacent to the Foyle. Again, you have container in the forefront there with the turbine. So the application is to amend the what is on site to reduce it in height. Suppose they cut it in half and put it down to a metre in height, and also to erect a security fence about 2 metres high on the northern edge. The bridge, so suppose it's ad hoc in nature, it will be set on the ground and won't be attached for any structural foundations. In terms of policy context, the application is located in the countryside outside of any development limit and will be subject to RDS, the Dairy Area Plan, policy EMV 9 within the Dairy Area Plan, SPPS, PPS 3, PPS 2 Natural Heritage, PPS 15 relating to flooding and planning and flood risk, and PPS 21. We consulted a number of bodies in relation to the application, including DFA Rivers, who indicated the site lies within the 1 and 200 coastal floodplain. DFA Roads indicated they have no objection to the proposal, given its location away from the public road. Environmental Health have no objection. NIA didn't provide any comment because there was no supporting information submitted with the application, the required comment. We also consulted Shared Environmental Services, and they considered, due to the nature, scale, time and duration, location of the project, is concluded as a limited from further assessment and didn't go to stage 2. HRA and Rocks Agency made a comment that they prefer that the bridge construction would not require any disturbance to the river channel and bed. And that would ideally mean support platforms being constructed beyond the riverbank and associated levees. So in terms of context, the proposal is essentially an access to a static mobile home located in an adjacent agricultural field. The home does not benefit from planning permission. It's also noteworthy, members, that there's another existing agricultural access to the northeast of the site onto Station Road. So this is not the only available access to the mobile home or indeed the agricultural field. The proposed security fence to be 2.1 metres in height, and the site is open with minimal screening provided by long grass. So it offers us consideration, the key policy consideration in terms of the location and a type of application is CTOA 1 of PPS 21. CTOA 1 sets out the types of development that are acceptable in the countryside. So in cases where it's not prescriptive, it states that other types of developments will only be permitted where there are overriding reasons why that development is essential and could not be located within a settlement or otherwise allocated for development in a development plan. CTOA 1 does not have specific direction on the erection of a footbridge in a rural area. Therefore, the onus is on the applicant to demonstrate why is it essential. It is the view of officers that no reasonable case has been put forward for the need for the bridge at this location. It has been considered by officers whether it's essential for purposes of access in the agricultural field. However, it is clear that the applicant has other available permitted options to access this land, including using an existing access to the northeast of the site or availing of their permitted development rights in relation to agricultural access. The applicant has also indicated that the bridge would be used for pedestrian access to his land, and therefore it is a view of officers that limits its usefulness in terms of being an agricultural access. Access to the mobile home and building to the south of the bridge would appear to be the purpose of the footbridge. Neither of these structures appear to be an agricultural use during site visits, and as stated before, the mobile home is unauthorised. Therefore, it is the conclusion of officers that the proposal does not meet the policy requirements of CTOA 1, and it is not one of the stated acceptable forms of development in the countryside, and a suitable case has not been put forward to demonstrate that it's essential and exceptional. They allow the application to, that policy CTOA 1 to be set aside. Furthermore, SPPS and PPS 1 set out that all development in the countryside must integrate. Proposal will not sufficiently integrate, in the opinion of officers, due to the height of the proposed fencing, which will be prominent when viewed from short and longer range views. So therefore, we have articulated in our case officer report that the proposal is contrary to the SPPS and CTOA 13 and 14 of PPS 21. The site is located within the 1 in 200 coastal floodplain. We have considered whether it will be an exception under FLD 1, but we do not believe that it meets any of the stated exceptions as indicated within that policy. Therefore, we believe that the policy does not meet FLD 1. As indicated before, there will be no impact on the public road, so we have no concerns in terms of access, movement or parking. We have no concerns given, I suppose, the nature of the proposal and its fairly non-intrusive construction methods used. So in terms of impact on ecology or the protected areas, we do not concern in that respect. Members would also be aware of a lit item received, which had some new information that was not included in the original consideration of the plan application. The lit item refers to applicants' farm buildings. It is the opinion of officers that no farm buildings exist at the site or nearby. What we view on site is an unauthorised mobile home, a concrete building which appears to be blocked up, and an unauthorised pumping station and wind turbine. The lead item refers to the nearest access being half a mile away and shows a photo which they believe is existing access referred to in the case officer report. We believe that this is inaccurate as the case officer report refers to a much closer existing agricultural access, which is approximately 177 metres to the northeast of the site and within ownership of the applicant. And just to give a context of that point, the access that we refer to in the report and earlier in the presentation is indicated on the ortho map here, and the red riding the gate to the northwest of the site, 170 metres away. And this photograph from Google Street View will show you the actual agricultural fence and gate into that area. And you could see probably in the background there, the existing container bridge, as I say, about 170 metres away. So having considered the application proposal and considered the case put forward by the applicant and all material considerations, including the relevant policies, it is officer's opinion and recommendation that the proposal is unacceptable as is contrary to SPPS policy CTY 1 1314 of PPS 101. As it is an inappropriate form of development in the countryside, and due to its prominence and lack of integration. And it's also contrary to PPS 15 as it's located in the 1 and 200 coastal floodplain is not a stated exception to that policy. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Malachy. Okay, members, I have one speaker for you, the agent, Paul McGarvey. Indeed, the gentleman who that late item, as we referred to it in inverted commas. Paul, you're very welcome this afternoon. You have 5 minutes to address the committee, and so therefore I now welcome you to do so. So without further ado, Paul, over to yourself.
Thank you very much indeed. Can you hear me all right?
We're hearing you very loud and very clear. Thank you.
Well, I wasn't expecting a lot of that feedback from Malachy McCarran because I can't disagree with anything that he said there, provided it was. Sorry, there's things come up on my screen. Can you still hear me?
Yes, Paul, we can hear you loud and clear.
Something strange has come up on my screen, however. But the point being, everything he says is correct. If this was a bridge that had been erected where none had been before, what Malachy fails to show is the image that I submitted of the original bridge that has been there for 70 years. This is not a new installation. Physically it might be, but it's actually a replacement bridge. So a lot of the arguments that were brought up there are, I feel, totally irrelevant, because if the current proposal doesn't meet the policies, then that means the original bridge that's been there for 70 years didn't meet those policies either. So I'm just going to try to bring it up to my camera, the image, if you can see that, of the original bridge, which was there up until a couple of years ago. Can you see that okay?
Paul, we're not seeing that, but is that, you submitted a late item, and if I can possibly describe it for you, is that looking directly at it, and it looks like there's a high wire fence with a wind turbine at the far end of it, yeah? Is that the same one you're talking about?
That's the original bridge, yes.
Yeah, okay, Paul, I'm just going to assure you, Paul, we have all those photographs here, so if you want to talk us through it.
So I think, my point is that Malachy's points that he raised there, I think were misleading in the sense that more reference should be made to the fact that there always has been a bridge here. It's not that the client is trying to introduce something that's physically new. So my point being that the application site lies to, and I'm not even sure whether it's within or it's very close to the ASSI. and within the Greenbelt. The Gallagher family acquired the farmlands shortly after the Second World War, and the steel footbridge across the lagoon and buildings were erected by the MOD in the 1940s. As can be seen from the photograph above, taken in 2015, the bridge deck was rotten, in a precarious state and a significant health and safety hazard. Note that there's also a mesh steel gate and fence at the southern end to protect from vandalism and theft from the farm. Mr. Gallagher came up with the ingenious solution to repurpose an old container to replace the bridge over the lagoon, as you can see below. Second page, the container offers protected access to the farm buildings. And I want to pause there a second because, again, Malachy keeps referring to this mobile home, which is something that has been introduced actually after the bridge. And it's not a mobile home. It may be to appear that way, but it's actually the farm office. And there are, as he refers to, concrete buildings. Those are the farm buildings that have been repurposed from the MOD time. So that's a strong reason for the adjacent access to all those buildings. The mobile home he refers to, which we call the farm office, will be subject to a later planning application for its retention. Anyway, back to where I was. Mr. Gallagher, I think, should be commended for his green recycled solution rather than wasting valuable resources to construct a new bridge, which was estimated at about £30,000. There have been incidents in the past of unsocial activities, vandalism and theft from the farm. Thus, security is essential to protect people, the farm machinery and tools. During the planning application, the case officer thought the container as existing was unsightly, and we agreed with this. Thus, we agreed to reduce it in height and to leave the base only with a 1.1 high sides and paint it in a camouflage dark green colour to better be absorbed within the landscape. And you have seen those revised drawings. There's actually, I'll also bring it to the screen. No, you can't see these because there was a wee perspective sketch that hasn't appeared on the submission there. Anyway, the case officer seemed happy with this without prejudice, but when we added the 2.1 metre high security fence and gate, the application was recommended for refusal. It is clear that the farm is entitled to a replacement bridge, contrary to what, may I say, Mr. McCarron is saying. So it's entitled to replace a replacement bridge in principle, but the planning office now also point out there's a vehicular access about half a mile away. I want to clarify, I didn't notice that gate that he's referring to, but again, you can't bring a car up that overgrown lane that he's referring to, and it shows how impractical it is to access the farm buildings from here. Farm machinery, yes, but not his car. The farm cannot be accessed by vehicles across the container due to its height above the ground and restricted width. Mr. Gallagher parks on the lane and walks over the bridge, and he has done this for, the family have done this for 70 years. It's just the bridge we're proposing is in a different format to what was there before. Thus, in our opinion, the only remaining issue... Yeah?
Sorry, Mr. McGarvey, your 5 minutes speaking rights is now finished.
Okay. Well, Paul, I'll afford you 2 minutes, but I would encourage you, obviously, to try and get through these last couple of slides that you have. We do have them in front of us. So I'll give you 2 minutes, Paul. Okay, thanks for that, Lois.
So, thank you for that. In our opinion, then, as the principle is established, in our opinion, the only remaining issue with the proposal seems to be the essential security fence, and the following photos show other security fences in the locality by way of precedent. The first one, well, I'll not go into detail, is about half a mile along the lane. The second photograph is a security fencing to Rivers Agency installation closer to the application site. There's security fencing to the railway line for obvious reasons, and security fencing to the northern boundary of the airport and Lower Airfield Road. These 4 examples of security fencing in the same locality as the application site reinforce the need and precedence of such fencing in this area. Our proposed fencing and gate will be much more discreet than these examples, but just as important. Given all the above information, I would ask Council to give favourable consideration to this application and to let Mr Gallagher proceed with the remedial works as proposed, which we consider to be an excellent compromise.
Thank you, Paul, and thanks for winding that up so quickly. As I said to you, the images that you presented to the committee are in front of the committee for consideration, but thanks for walking us through that again. Members, I'm going to open it to the floor. If any of you have any questions that you'd like to put to Paul, who's the agent on behalf of the applicant. So it's over to yourselves, members, online and indeed here in the chamber. Councillor Jackson.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Mr. McGarvey. Just a brief question around the previous bridge that was in existence or that had been replaced. Paul, is there any chance you could explain the challenges around replacing the bridge like for like? I know you referred to an indicative figure and referred to the environmental benefits of reusing the existing container, but I just wouldn't mind teasing out a wee bit more around what challenges was there any prohibitive factors that prevented the applicant replacing the bridge with something a lot more similar to what was there before? Thanks, Chair.
Yes, Councillor Jackson, the existing bridge, as you can see, was completely rotten and beyond restoration, which would have been the first option. And he went with a photograph of the existing bridge to local engineering works. And obviously it would have to be galvanized to protect it. That was one of the problems. The existing bridge was not galvanized and rotted away eventually. So they gave an estimation of fabrication, galvanizing and erecting on site onto the existing foundations of about £30,000. And he just doesn't have that. The farm's not viable enough to warrant that expenditure. That's the problem.
Okay, thank you for that. Do you have any further questions, Councillor Jackson? If you go ahead. Yeah.
Just a small supplementary question to that. In relation to the farm activity, what would the normal activity of this particular farm land? Thanks.
It's primarily arable farming for grass, and that's harvested and brought to other parts of his farmland or passed on to other farmers for grazing. The problem is the land. It's not like a normal farm because the land is so low to the water table, so it doesn't accommodate heavy machinery as easily as other farms might. And this is, all the lagoons and the Rivers Agency drainage systems do help a little bit, but it's a very mushy sort of land base to work from. So it's only arable farming, not for animals.
Okay, thank you, Mr. McGarvey. Members, any others? Councillor Mooney.
Thank you, Chair. Just a question for the agent there. Wonder, can you answer, let me know who will have access to the structure as such? My concern would be that there may be, is it private? Will it be just for the landowner, or will there be any way the public can use the structure? Thank you, Chair.
Yes.
Thank you. Go ahead, Mr. McGarvey.
Well, with the original bridge, you can see that the security fencing is actually on the landward side. So the public were actually able to go over the bridge up to that point. But this was highly dangerous, and given the fact that the decking was corroded, this wasn't a safe thing to do. Also, when the container was delivered to site and securely locked. Vandals broke in, got across the container and stole, what do you call those little four-wheel drive machines? Quad bike, and other farm machinery, which is stored, smaller machinery, which is stored in the concrete building that Mr. McCarran refers to. That there are tools and machinery and smaller machinery in there. So the idea is to prevent the public going in there as they have done in the past. So there's a high security element because the farm it's not a residential farm and nobody lives here within, I'm sure, a mile of, so that security is a very important issue and safety to the public, because you can try and stop them getting onto the bridge, but they will try everything to do so. It's a challenge to them. So we have to be certain that they don't get onto the bridge. Incidentally, Mr. Gallagher owns the lane, and it's fully open to the public, and many people walk it and enjoy the scenery. But this would be a limit to how far they could go across the lagoon as such. So it's a combination of security and ease of access for Mr. Gallagher, but not anybody else.
Thank you. Mr. McGarvey, Mr. Mooney, you're content to move on? Yep. Okay. Any members who are online with us have any questions? Can you please put them in the chat box? If you don't, then I'm going to move on from questions to the agent. I'll give you a second there. Mr. McGarvey, I have one question of my own. You referenced, and I'm looking at your late item that came in to us. I apologise for the phrase late item, but this is how these things are considered when they come in after the process begins, I suppose. So the Gallagher family acquired the lands after World War II, and so therefore what you're saying is that the footbridge as it existed at that time was in situ, because it was effectively erected by the Ministry of Defence.
Correct.
And so therefore you're suggesting, well, this is simply a replacement for a bridge?
Yes. Yes.
But it's not necessarily, I wrote something down here. Maybe the contention might be it's the style of the replacement that might be at issue. I'm not entirely, I will ask the officer, but I mean, would that be your interpretation of it?
Initially, it was the impact as you see it today. That's why in discussions with the planners, we agreed to reduce the height of it and paint it, camouflage it. And that seemed to be okay. And the case officer seemed happy with that. But when I then introduced the security fencing, it backfired, let's say. And but even Mr. McCarran says that the proposal that we have does not have a significant impact. Will not have. Perhaps the container as is has an impact, but modified as proposed, he states himself it will not have a significant impact. So I think then the only thing of contention is the security fence.
Okay, thank you for that. Members, I'm going to move on here. No other questions. Thank you for that, Mr. McGarvey. Members, again, opportunity now to address any questions you have to Malachy. Mr. Jackson.
Thanks, Chair. And I suppose it's just a simple question in relation to what weight did officers place on the very fact that there was an existing structure there, and this is a replacement of what was something that was installed, essentially a military structure. That bit.
Thank you, Councillor Jackson. Yes, we were aware during the process of the application that there previously existed a bridge on the site. Now, during the, as shown by our photographs at the time of assessing the application, that bridge was no longer there. And as you can see in Mr. McGarvey's submission, the photographs in 2015, going back 7 years, showed it in a state of disrepair. So we reviewed at that stage that it probably hadn't been used for a long time, looking at the bridge. But in terms of which, we have to look at the policy in terms of CTUA1 at the proposal in front of us. The proposal in front of us is what does planning policy now allow in terms of development in the countryside. As I stated in my report and in the speaking notes, PPS 21 is silent on the subject of replacement bridges or bridges. We have looked at all other retained planning policies to see if there's anything that would fit neatly in it. However, isn't. So we went back to the second paragraph of CTUA 1, and our view is if it isn't one of the stated exceptions, and if it doesn't fall in within one of the other policy assessments, that is that the type of development isn't covered, then it has to be, you have to demonstrate that it's essential. And I suppose this goes back to the planning history and whether the buildings and the purpose of the proposed bridge is essential at that location. The point we make in that respect is that there is numerous ways to access that farm. Whether the mobile home is a mobile home or a farm office, it is, in our view, we couldn't give much weight to it because it doesn't have planning permission for either of those. The store at the time of the site visit doesn't appear to be in use. So those are all the things that we give significant weight in our recommendation in our case officer report. Thank you.
Thank you, Molly. Okay, yep, thank you. Any other members, any questions for Malachy? No questions on the chamber, don't see any online. Okay. Members, as I'm sure you're all aware, there's a recommendation in front of you. Recommendation is to refuse LA 11 2021 1218/F. And as members of the committee, I'm obviously going to seek some direction from you. So let's again back to yourselves. Go ahead, Councillor Mooney.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to say thank you to the officer and to the agent in this matter, but having read the material and listened to both of them, I am not persuaded by the agent, and therefore I would propose that we accept the officer's recommendation in this matter. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Mooney. So a proposal from Councillor Mooney, and I need a seconder. Councillor Jackson.
Thanks, Chair. And firstly, I'm content to second the proposal from Councillor Mooney. And it has come back to the point that it's very difficult for us as a committee to establish how essential this access is. And I think this might be a case of a cart before the horse. I know the agent referred to an application that may be coming forward in relation to the farm office. If there was a planning history or something in planning terms that showed the established use of that structure, then I suppose we could look further into how essential this access is. But the information that's in front of us today, I don't think I feel that I don't have a choice but to agree with the officer recommendation. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Jackson. So, members, we have a proposal from Councillor Mooney, seconded by Councillor Jackson, and I'm going to ask the head of planning to put that to the vote.
Thank you, Chair. Members, this is item 6, and the proposal is to accept the officer's recommendation. Alderman Alan Breslin. No. Alderman Keith Kerrigan.
For, Maura.
Thank you. Alderman Drew Thompson.
For, Maura.
Councillor Jason Barr. Apologies. Councillor Raymond Barr.
For, Maura.
Councillor John Boyle.
Or
Thank you. Councillor Angela Dobbins.
Maura, I was late and therefore cannot vote.
No problem, that's right. Thank you, Angela. Councillor Paul Gallagher.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Christopher Jackson.
More.
Councillor Dan Kelly.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Kieran Maguire.
I was late as well, Maura.
Okay. And Councillor Sean Mooney. It's Councillor
For.
Kenny. It's apologies. Sorry, Councillor Sean Mooney. For. All in favour? It's unanimous. Yeah.
Okay, that's unanimous. Members, thank you very much for your attention. Thank you, Mr. McGarvey, for attending today on behalf of your applicant. And we will now proceed on to the next item for decision, which is item number 7. As I have it from yesterday, I don't think I'm wrong. So it's item number 7. It's LA 11 2022-0437F. Somebody's got their microphone there. Can I just ask that all microphones are turned off? Thank you. As I have it, there are no late items in relation to this. So Malachy is going to present the report. And we have one speaker, but Malachy, if you could present the report first. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Item 7 is LA 11 2022-0437 as a full planning application for retention of extension to residential curtilage to form garden together with 2.1 and 2.4 metre high fencing, and the recommendation is to refuse. The application is set out before you in the attached ordnance survey map as outlined in red. The application site comprises of an existing dwelling known as 12 Earhart Park and part of an open green space to the land to the rear along the Madams Bank Road. Number 12 is within a large housing estate known as Earhart Park, characterised by semi-detached dwellings with relatively modest gardens to the front and rear. Earhart Park is separated from the Madams Bank Road by existing open space containing a path that connects to a pedestrian lane running between Earhart Park and Rockfield. The path leads to the Bayern Country Park. The application site is located within the development limits of Derry, and it's located in an established residential area. So part of the site is within the residential area and part with what would have been an existing open space. So just to give the context of the site, the attached image shows an aerial pre-development. So this was a photograph from before the development was commenced. So as you'll see at the top here, you have the application site number 12, which is at the corner of a cul-de-sac. And its back garden backs onto the laneway that leads from Madams Bank Road to Bayern Country Park. It had an established curtilage, which, as you'll see, was in line in terms with the other established curtilages as defined at Earhart Park. The rest of the red line goes into an area which we would consider open space associated with the residential development at Earhart Park. So you could see that that was characterised by, I suppose, grassland and some vegetation. And it was part of a larger green buffer between the road and the housing development. So this is an aerial of how the site looks at present. So again, you can see number 12 at the corner of the cul-de-sac in Earhart Park. And the green area has been replaced by a close boarded fence, which bounds the three sides here, and then the green area has been replaced by a hardcore gravel for the extent beyond the original curtilage. So if you view the site from Adamsbank Road, looking from Steelstown Road at the junction here towards it, you will see the padding fence at its closest point to the road. So that's the very end of the extended curtilage. And in terms of submitted plans and elevations, so the applicant has submitted a block plan showing the extent of the extended area. It's sort of showing the sort of pink shaded area here. So in terms of policy context, RDS, it's within the developments, the Dairy Area Plan, B1, policy B1 with particular relevance, SPPS, and the key policy consideration in relation to this proposal will be PPS 8 in relation to open space, sport and outdoor recreation. For your information, there was 6 letters of objection received from 3 households. The issues raised included the remaining open space used as vehicular access for rear of site and related civic concerns. The extended site is in commercial use, selling ice creams and vans stored there. They object to the removal of the original vegetation, insufficient neighbour notification, increased antisocial behaviour, and water leaking from the site into open space. We have detailed our response to each of those points raised within the case officer report. We consulted DFI Roads in relation to the application, and we also raised the concerns of the neighbouring properties with DFI Roads. They have no objection in principle to the proposal, but they indicated that there appears to be a vehicular gate located at the rear of the extended area, which they would like to be removed. They've been their maintenance section has been contacted by concerned citizens due to vehicles accessing and exiting this extended curtilage to the rear of number 12 Earhart Park. And vehicles have been observed driving along a footpath to the rear of the green space between Adamsbank Road and Earhart Park and exiting onto the raised traffic table on Earhart Park near the junction. The FA roads not considered a footpath an appropriate means of access to the site. And it should be noted that the footpath is not part of the adopted public road network or maintained by the department. This is a matter for council to consider. I should note at this point that the application description and the drawings don't indicate a vehicular access, and therefore it's not part of the proposal the applicant has put before us. So in terms of policy consideration, the proposal is for the retention of the extension of the curtilage and associated fencing only. There's no commercial element to the proposal, nor is there an additional vehicular access proposed. The additional land used to form the curtilage extension was established open space. It's our opinion that when we look at the PPS 8 and the attached glossary which describes open space, that the land that has been taken for this extension fully falls within the description of open space. It was a green wedge with vegetation, which was established at the front of the residential scheme known as Earhart Park. So the proposal does not constitute an exception under policy OS1 of PPS 8. Therefore, it is contrary to the policy in paragraph 2.3 of the SPPS. The proposal, we also believe the proposal also affects the visual amenity afforded by the green space by reducing it in size and by substantially breaking the rear building line of the wider housing development. The latter is made all the more noticeable by fencing, which highlights just how extensive the projection into the green space is. So, I mean, the policy OS1, just to go back in terms of exceptions, it does allow that there's a presumption against development in open space unless an exception can be established, and it states that it's a very narrow window of exception, and in this case that there's been no satisfactory case put forward by the applicant, the demonstrative met OS1, and the officers that do not believe it meets the stated exceptions. So, in conclusion, the proposal fails to meet the policy requirements of the area plan, the SPPS and PPS 8, and our recommendation is to refuse. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Malachy. Thanks for that report. Members, there is one speaker for you to hear on behalf of the applicant. So can I extend a welcome to Kitty McDermott. Kitty, you will have 5 minutes to present to the committee on behalf of the applicant. So whenever you're ready to go for it, we're happy to hear from you. Thank you.
Okay. Hello, John. Can you hear me?
We're hearing you loud and clear. Thank you.
Thank you. Bearing in mind here that I am only representing Mr. Coyle here, as he has had 4 subsequent strokes and due to his health is unable to take this call today. Mr. Coyle acquired the land by purchase around 20 years ago from the housing executive. When this land was sold, other members here in the same row of houses were offered the same amount of land to extend their homes for their backyard purposes. Now, Mr. Coyle put this fence up due to antisocial behaviour, real deviant behaviour, where the police have been called out and also the fire brigade have been called out, where the items have been set alight and drug items have been found. Also on the back laneway, coming down from the back of the house, scramblers and motorbikes were ripping up the land from Mr. Coyle. And also Mr. Coyle was worried about insurance-wise, should anyone have an accident on this land, Mr. Coyle would be responsible. Now, why would the housing executive, for one, sell Mr. Coyle this land if he could not do anything with it and secure his own property? They had terrible problems with graffiti, etc., and they don't understand why complaints were made. Since the fence has went up, there have been no more bother in regards to antisocial behaviour, no graffiti, no eggs being thrown at their windows, etc. They have had no more problems, and indeed neighbours have thanked them for putting up this fence. Now, we know that there is a gate towards the bottom of this fence, but Mr. Coyle has no problem closing up this gate. No problems whatsoever. He has spent over £18,000 securing this fence and putting it up, and it is not blocking anybody's light, it is not obstructing anyone else, and no one in the area, this immediate area that they live in, has complained whatsoever. Are you there?
Yes, I'm
Yeah,
curious
yes,
as to whether you're finished or
yes,
you let me know when you're.
Yes. Mr. Coyle also has had trouble all the years that he had owned this land, picking up rubbish every week, it was a dumping area for some people who dumped settees, etc., pieces of furniture, bags of rubbish, and Mr. Coyle was at his own expense getting rid of all this rubbish. And when the sofas were set alight, the fire brigade were called out. The police has also, as I have said, been called out on many occasions. So Mr. Coyle is very happy with the fence, and so is everyone else. And we just don't see why anyone would want to complain about Mr. Coyle wanting to secure his own property and not have to pay out insurance should any accidents happen on it, because the ground has been ripped up with the motorbikes and scramblers. There was drug taking where needles were found, which were dangerous and hazardous to children. And Mr. Coyle has a grandchild who has special needs and has himself picked up one of these needles. So that was a great worry. Now Mr. Coyle is not well, and I'm sorry, I don't understand council language, but I'm just speaking on behalf of Mr. Coyle. And I would ask that this fence be approved, as it is not obstructing anyone, and the antisocial behaviour has completely stopped. No blockage of light or no other obstruction has been caused by this fence, and he is quite willing to close the gate. It was not put in for vehicular access at all, and there will be no vehicles using this land. It is just an extension to a garden that was offered to everyone else, and Mr. Coyle is the only person who purchased the land. So that is my speech on behalf of Mr. Coyle. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McDermott. Okay, I'm going to open that up to the members of the Planning Committee if they should so wish to ask you any questions in relation to that. So just bear with me for a minute or two whilst I see if there are any indicated speakers and questions coming your way.
Okay.
Okay, that's fine, Ms. McDermott. Nobody has any questions for you. Please do stay with us.
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you, and thank you for your input in relation to this matter. Members, passing it back to you again. If any of you have any questions for Planning Officer Malachy McCarron. Now, of course, is your opportunity to address those to Malachy. And again, no further questions or comment, either in the chat box or indeed here in the chamber. So, Malachy, I have one question. I actually have two, sorry. As Ms. McDermott said, the land was acquired by Mr. Coyle from the Northern Ireland Housing Executive some 20 years ago, I think somebody said. I mean, I'm not doubting that, but did anybody actually think to ask the Northern Ireland Housing Executive how it came to be that this one parcel of land was acquired by Mr. Coyle and perhaps the others weren't? It may well not be germane to the decision, but I'm at the same time, I'm still curious about that. And further to that, in the event, and I'm looking at the parking access and the DFI response to this, in the event that Mr. Coyle were to remove the gates to the rear of the property, might that then potentially change the situation here? Of course, I would imagine that would require another application. Just to advise the committee and clear that up for us.
I'm not sure what the first question was in relation to housing executive.
Well, I mean,
repeat that, sorry?
the contention here is that the housing executive were offering off these parcels of land, and so therefore Mr. Coyle acquired this parcel of land in good faith. And so I suppose what I'm asking here is, if that's the case, and that's fine, it's his land, but what we're effectively saying is that he can't put a fence up around it. Is that correct?
Yeah, regardless of the ownership or, you know, how it was purchased, it will be subject to the planning policy that's prevalent at the minute. No, in relation to the second question, to the access, now, as I say, we haven't presented a refusal reason because it's not part of this proposal. They access the site in terms of the vehicular access. So that would be subject to a separate application if they wanted to use that as a vehicle access. But as it stands, they've asked for an extension of their residential curtilage, and they've asked for the fence to be retained. And if that fence or gate has been used in a way that it shouldn't be used, that would be subject to further investigations by bodies such as our enforcement team.
Okay, Malachy, that's grand. I see that on the refusal reasons, but I think it's very important, again, for me, certainly, that we ensure that is part of the narrative in relation to this, and the refusal reasons are what they are. Members, if there's nobody else with any questions, Councillor Kelly in the chat box. Go ahead, Dan.
Thanks, Chair. I suppose maybe inadvertently one of the questions I had has been answered in response to yourself, and it was really around, I suppose, the purpose for why it was purchased in the first place. As was stated, it was for a garden, but I'm looking at photos of an area of hard standing with piles of fill and with vehicles parked on it. So that doesn't, the pictures of what I'm looking at and the pictures isn't marrying up in my head with what I'm hearing in terms of the usage. I suppose maybe that's kind of immaterial. And I'm just wondering, is part of the reason that the land, the rest of the land that was offered to the other residents, that offer wasn't taken up because they were aware of the open space zoning effectively, and that it would be of no value to them in terms of doing anything with it? Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor Kelly. I don't know if you can answer that, Malachy, but or Maura, Dan Maura, I'll attempt to answer that, but I suppose we could only be speculative in relation
I think
to that.
it's very speculative. It's difficult for officers to know what was on the minds of you know, at the time when they were offered the land. But clearly what Malachy is saying for the purposes of today and decision making is that it's immaterial of who owns the land. It's about what that land presently is used for and what the policy context is. So it's immaterial. Thanks.
Okay, Councillor Kelly, are you content to move on from that?
Chair, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kelly. Any other members? All right. Okay, members, again, we'll roll it back to the very beginning. There clearly has a recommendation in front of you in relation to LA 11-2022-0437F. The recommendation there is to refuse this application. And again, as chair of the committee, I'll take direction from yourselves. So anybody who has any proposals, now's your time. Thank you.
Hello, if I could just speak, please.
I'm terribly sorry, Ms. Coyle.
Okay.
We've now moved to the vote. There is no
fine,
further
no problem.
there is no further opportunity
No problem. That's
that I
okay.
can afford you. Okay, so
Thank you.
members,
Thank you.
you're okay. That's fine. Members are very familiar with the process. We don't expect everybody else might be. So members, again, it's open to yourselves. I put it back to the floor. Councillor Mooney.
Thank you, Chair. Like the previous application, Chair, I've listened intently to the officer and to the applicant's agent. I've read the pack and I've read the pack and I've looked at the evidence brought to the committee. Again, I'm not persuaded by the applicant in this matter. I do believe that like the officers and the policy in this matter, and information that I've heard so far through the questions being asked leads me to one conclusion. I should be, and I'm content in this matter to propose that we accept the officer's recommendation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Mooney. So we have a proposal there from Councillor Mooney to accept officer recommendation. I'm obviously requiring a seconder in relation to that. Members.
I second, Chair. Councillor Barr.
Thank you, Councillor Raymond Barr. Thank you for that. So, members, we do have a formal proposal, a formal seconder, Councillor Mooney, Councillor Raymond Barr. And to that effect, then, it lies to me to ask the Head of Planning to put that to the vote.
Thank you, Chair. Members, this is item 7, and the proposal is to accept the officer's recommendation. Alderman Alan Breslin.
For.
Thank you. Alderman Keith Kerrigan.
For, Mara.
Thank you. Alderman Drew Thompson.
For, Mara.
Thank you. Councillor Jason Barr as apologies. Councillor Raymond Barr.
For.
Thank you. Councillor John Boyle.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Angela Dobbins.
For, Mara.
Thank you. Councillor Paul Gallagher.
For, Mara.
Thank you. Councillor Christopher Jackson.
Or more.
Thank you. Councillor Dan Kelly.
For, Mara.
Thank you. Councillor Patricia Logue, apologies. Councillor Kieran Maguire. Still not on. Sorry, thank you. For Councillor Philip McKinney. Apologies. And Councillor Sean Mooney.
For.
Thank you.
That's unanimous, members. Thank you. And again, thank you, Ms. McDermott, for coming along and presenting to us this afternoon. I'm going to move us on now to the next application. And the next one on our agreed list is item number 11, which is LA 11 2021 0614/O. Proposed site for dwelling garage approximately, well, I think you can all see it there. Katrina is going to present that to us. And we have a speaker in relation to that. And I've just wish we had so much in the way of late information. I'm just going to double check more. There was no late information on that. Okay. Right. So, members, we'll move forward. Katrina, go for it.
Thank you, Chair. So the application is a site 70 metres north of 41 Maher and Nagira Road in Ahayarn. So the site location here, the site is located in the rural area, approximately 1 kilometre north of Killeader. In the immediate vicinity of the site, there's a bungalow at number 41, a prefabricated office building here at number 43, a 2-storey dwelling at number 45, and a bungalow on the opposite side of the road here at 44. The application site is located on the southwestern section of a larger agricultural field between 41 and 43 Maher Nagira Road. The site includes a section of the side and rear garden of 41. You can kind of see here at the front, the red line. And the northern part of the site within the field is set back 30 metres from the road. The eastern site boundary through the field is undefined. The north, east and southern boundaries of the site are the garden of number 41 and are defined by a post and wire fence. The southern and western boundaries within the garden are undefined, and the northwest boundary of the site adjoins this prefabricated office building up here, and the roadside boundary is undefined or is defined by a roadside fence. So this top photograph here shows the frontage of the site looking back. So the bungalow that you can see there is number 41. And the bottom photograph shows the watercourse that cuts through the middle of the site, separating the field from the garden of number 41. So the policy context today is a Strabane Area Plan, a Strategic Plan and Policy Statement, Plan and Policy Statement 21, Plan and Policy Statement 2, Plan and Policy Statement 3, Plan and Policy Statement 15, and Building on Tradition. So to begin, the first policy that we assessed was policy CTY 2A. So as you can see here, there's 6 tests. And of those 6 tests, we felt that it didn't meet 4 of the tests and satisfied 2 of the tests, but you have to meet all of the tests. So I'll just run through the tests here. So the first test, we considered that it's met. You can see here the yellow circle. It's the cluster lies outside a farm and consists of 4 buildings, and the 3 dwellings at 41, 44 and 45, and the prefab office building at 43. So the second test is not met as the cluster does not appear as a visual entity in the landscape. Approaching from the east along Mahara Nagira Road, you can see 41, 44 and the prefab at 43. And going in the opposite direction, there's a visual gap, so it doesn't appear as a visual entity in the landscape. So criteria 3 is whether it's sited at a crossroads or it has a focal point such as a social or community building. You can see on this map here that the nearest crossroads there are identified 630 metres away, and the nearest settlement that they're relying on as a focal point, it can't be considered that because it's a settlement, but it's 1 kilometre away. So criteria 3 of C2I2A is not met. So criteria 4 is not met because, as you can see here, it's a very open site and devoid of much vegetation. So as a result, a dwelling on this site, you can see it identified there, would be openly visible with sustained views and wouldn't integrate into the landscape. So criteria 5, the development of the site would not extend beyond the existing boundaries of the adjacent buildings. However, a dwelling on this site would create a ribbon of development and add to a build-up of development at this location and would alter the rural character of this existing cluster. So the 5th criteria is not met. So moving on to policy C2I8 and policy C2I14, I think it's important at this stage to clarify that during the initial stages of this application, while we always knew it didn't comply with policy C2I2A, we did advise at one point that we thought it did meet C2I8 in terms of an infill dwelling. Now, during the course of the application, there was a JR decision, and we as planners take our lead from that because it's the most recent decision, and we had to review this case. So the recent JR decision then went back to policy C2Y8 that said where the policy leads you to, planning permission will be refused for a building which creates or adds to a ribbon of development unless it is viewed as an exception. So while in PPS 21, it does go through bits of what we would consider an infill site, this JR went one step further. So it said, an infill site will only be permitted where there is little or nothing lost in terms of rural character because of the existing substantial and continuously built up frontage. And it also defined that the line of 3 or more buildings had to be along the road frontage without accompanying development to the rear. Now I'll just show you on the site here where you can see this site. So we reviewed a lot of our cases so that we didn't misdirect ourselves on policy, and this was one of the cases where it was very clear from the JR that it did not meet C2Y8. So that's just for clarification purposes. So as you can see from this, it didn't meet C2Y8 as an infill opportunity, and we considered that it created a ribbon of development. So in terms of other policy considerations, PPS 3, the development proposes a new access. DFI roads have no objections. PPS 15, planning and flood risk. The application site has a watercourse along it, but DFI rivers are content for a dwelling and garage to be sited outside a section of the site which is in the floodplain. Development shall use the existing agricultural crossing to cross the site. In terms of land contamination, there were no significant sources of previous contamination, and regulation unit and environmental health had no objections. So in terms of PPS 2, as I said, the water course crossed the site, but no culvert or streamworks were required. Ecologists found no evidence of otters or badgers, no suitable habitats for roosting bats. SES carried out a HRA, which concluded the development would not have an adverse effect on designated sites. SES and NED have no objections, subject to conditions. The new access will require the removal of some hedgerow for visibility displays. This is a low hedge, not mature, and does not contain any trees, and compensatory planting was given. And the development should not adversely impact protected or priority species. So in summary, the proposal is contrary to policy CTY1. It fails to meet 4 of the criteria of policy CTY2A. The proposal would create and add to a ribbon of development contrary to policies CTY8 and CTY14. The proposal is not considered to meet the exception for a small gap site within a substantial and continuously built up frontage, outlined as an exception to policy CTY8. And the proposal would add to a suburban style build-up of development contrary to policy CTY14. I'll just put up the refusal reasons, but they're detailed in the report anyway. Thank you.
Thank you, Katrina. Members, again, one further speaker in relation to this application. I hope, Mr. Brendan Johns online. Brendan, I'm not sure if, I think you might be the agent on behalf of the applicant. It's not here in my paper, but you're very welcome. Again, thanks for persevering and sticking with us for the last couple of days. So I now invite you to address the committee.
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me okay?
Loud and clear, Brendan. Go ahead.
Thank you. Chair, the applicants are Mr. and Mrs. Lynch, who are from the area, and they're keen to remain in that locality. Location of the proposed sites in the part of the county that can be basically described as the foothills of an upland area with pockets of dwellings grouped together in small communities close to the border with Donegal. The Ahiaran area is typical of one of those more isolated areas where local communities can be found in groups of houses providing social interaction and also providing mutual security. It can clearly be seen from the location plan that a group of houses exists beside the application site. Just now, in terms of the application, there are 2 main issues: the reasons for refusal and the procedural assessment of the proposal. The application for the dwelling garage was submitted in May 2021, been in the system for almost a year and a half, with the processing of it being somewhat confusing. The agent received an email from the planners on the 25th of August 2021 advising him that after discussions with the senior planner, the application had been assessed, and whilst the proposal could not be considered as a dwelling within a cluster, they would consider it acceptable as an infill dwelling on a gap site under CTY 8. Now, in my experience, for the case officer to recommend an approval is an opinion. To agree it with the senior planners is a corporate decision. And then to officially advise an applicant that their application will be approved is basically a firm commitment of acceptance, particularly when on that positive basis the planners requested in that same email, and I quote, "In order to progress the application to approval, please provide additional information including a biodiversity checklist, an ecological statement and some technical queries from the road service." So all that additional information was provided at a significant additional cost, particularly for the ecological report, and submitted in November 2021 with subsequent amendments in February 22. And the land required for the sightlines was in the control of the applicants. No further communication was received by the agent until the council planners contacted him relatively recently to say that the application was now going to the planning committee as a refusal on the basis that it was not acceptable as an infill dwelling or existing cluster. Now, the council planners, as we know, are committed to discharging their duties in an honest, fair, impartial and open manner, and are supposed to fully document the decision-making process. But there was no explanation as to why this sudden U-turn. I just note that the planning officer was quoting from the judicial review, but in terms of the judicial review, it isn't planning policy, and no two applications are the same. So you would wonder, are the planners going to assess all applications in the countryside for infills as refusals based on a judicial review? Like, basically, on the reasons for refusal, PPS 21 clearly states that the planning policies of PPS 21 must be read together with all relevant contents of other policy publications, including the RDS and the SPPS. The SPPS and the RDS both recognise that new residential development opportunities must respect local social and environmental circumstances, and they recognise that there are wide variations in environmental circumstances all across Northern Ireland. In addition to this, the Strabane Area Plan states that a less restrictive policy will be applied throughout the rural countryside, so clearly a lesser test can be applied to applications for dwellings in this type of area of special character. With regard to PPS 21, in particular ribbon development, it does set out the tests required. It states that section 6.69 that the policy approach must be to cluster, consolidate and group new development with existing established buildings where it can utilise existing services such as drainage and mains water, etc. And as the SPPS is forming the basis of the new local development plan, perhaps more weight should be put on the provisions of the policies contained within that document. The planners, contrary to their initial position, state that a ribbon of development does not exist beside the site, as there's not a line of 3 or more buildings. However, section 5.33 of CTY 8, the justification states that whilst a ribbon does not necessarily have to be served by individual accesses, nor have a continuous or uniform building line, buildings sited back, staggered and with gaps between them can still represent ribbon development if they have a common frontage, and importantly it says, or they are visually linked. Clearly from the submitted location plan and evidence from the planning officer that a dwelling on that site could be visually linked with the existing houses around. The planners also claimed that the proposed site provided an important visual break between existing development, where the policy states that many frontages in the countryside have gaps between houses that provide visual breaks. But clearly, whenever you look at this site, a proposed dwelling on that site will appear linked to the existing dwellings and not provide a visual break, as was insinuated.
Excuse me, Mr. Jones, I'm sorry, but your 5 minutes speaking allowance is up.
Sorry, I was just going to summarise, but
I'll give you a minute to sum up.
Yes, sorry, just 30 seconds would do it, Chairman. As
whatever works for you, I'm happy enough with that, but you can take a minute if you want.
Okay, thanks. As mentioned previously, the policy documents state that the planners must take into account all planning policy publications and have regard to the regional development strategy, which clearly accepts that there are wide variations across Northern Ireland in terms of social and environmental circumstances. So the main aim of the planning department is to manage development in a manner that strikes a balance between the protection of the environment while supporting and sustaining these rural communities. Clearly, the planners' arguments with regard to policy C2I 8 and the inference that there is a significant visual break between the proposed site and existing development appears very weak. This may have been why they originally were of the opinion to approve. So just notwithstanding, Chairman, that the applicants would respectfully request on that basis that the committee could approve this much needed dwelling. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Mr. Johns. Obviously, if you can stick with us, I'm going to open it up to the floor.
Sure.
members of the committee, I'm now going to pass that over to you. You've now got an opportunity to address some of the matters, ask some questions of Mr. Johns, if you so wish.
Yeah, you're right, mate.
Is that you, Councillor McGuire?
Yeah.
You're not coming through terribly loud and clear, but I think we'll persevere. So if you can, just go for it and we'll see if we can work with it. Go ahead, Kieran.
Could I just ask Mr. Johns again to summarise, there's 3 reasons for refusal there, and summarise how he feels that we should, that the application should be overturned on them 3 reasons. If he could just summarise them for us.
Okay, thank you, Councillor McGuire. So, Mr. Johns, if you just want to, I suppose Councillor McGuire is looking for that straightforward, simple, give it to us. Mr. Johns?
Sorry, Chair, can you hear me?
Yes, Councillor McGuire was basically looking for a quick summation of your presentation there. So you had 3 reasons for how you, or the 3 for how we could potentially look at finding a way to a different decision. So if you'd like to outline those for the benefit of the committee and indeed for Councillor McGuire.
Yeah, yes, Chair. Sorry about that. Yes, reasons 2 and 3 are separate policy reasons. If it's refused under policy CTY 2A, then CTY 8 doesn't come into it, and vice versa. So whilst if it happens to be acceptable as an exception to ribbon development, then the application can be approved. It doesn't necessarily have to satisfy reason 2 and 3 both together. Reason 1 is just if the application is going to be refused, that goes in. But policy CTY 1 states that when it says no overriding reasons why this development is essential, only relates to other types of development. As anybody can see at the forerunner of CTY 1, that's what it says. There's a range of development opportunities available, but where there are no, where there are no, that doesn't fit into any of those policies, then reason number 1 is used. And I hope that clears that up.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor McGuire, I'm going to
Thank you, Chair.
you again. Go ahead, Councillor McGuire.
Thank you, Chair. That's enough.
Right, are you content to move on, Councillor McGuire? As I said, it's not the greatest connection we have here. I think you said you were. Is that okay? Yeah?
Yes, Chair. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor McGuire. Okay, members, anyone else? Councillor Kerrigan.
Thank you very much, Chair, for allowing me in, and be very brief, because I think, to be fair, Councillor McGuire's kind of got an answer there from him. I do see, Mr. Johns, as I say, the 3 refusal reasons, and I would be sympathetic to your application there, knowing that area, but as you are plainly stating here, it's either CTY 8 and 14 or it's CTY 2A. We don't have to, in your opinion here, we don't have to meet all of the 6 criteria on CTY 2A if it's acceptable under CTY 8 under the ribbon development. And again, knowing that area, to be fair, I'm deviating very briefly. Know that area because I drive that area brave and often, but we did a walk for their ambulance and walked that road, you know, and oftentimes when you're walking on the road, it's different again from when you're driving on it. But and seeing the area, that area, in my view, and that section of the Mahanagira Road is not ribbon. The other section where Mahanagira Road meets the Mulnabreen Road, there are 4 houses very close together. I think it's 49 to 51. You know, that is a ribbon, in my opinion, whereby your section is more of a cluster, in my view. But I'm just querying, just clarifying again, in your view here, Mr. Johns, if we meet the CTY 8 and CTY 14, it doesn't matter about CTY 2A. That's your view on it. Just clarifying that point. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Kerrigan, and back to yourself, Mr. Johns.
That's right, Councillor. That's what that's my reading of it. That when a dwelling is assessed, it's generally assessed under all planning policies and all planning guidance. But I would think that if the proposal fitted into CTY 8, then CTY 2 it doesn't apply.
Thank you. Consent to move on. Alderman Kerrigan?
Yes, Chair, thank you.
Thank you, Alderman. Okay. Members, anybody else for Mr. Johns? No further indicated questions. Members, again, open it up. Thank you, Mr. Johns. I'm now going to move over to questions to the our officer here, Katrina. Members, any questions for Katrina?
Councillor Maguire again.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Maguire. Go ahead, Kieran.
Chair, would Katrina have any photographs or even street view photographs of house number 44 and what's beside it or linked to it on that street?
Bear with us. We'll have a look at the file here, I think.
Councillor Maguire, the only one that I can kind of see, I don't know if you can see that on your screen there at the minute. Kind of see 44 there on the right of the screen, but we wouldn't have anything, I don't think, directly in front of it.
Yeah.
Or just, you know, the overhead there. I don't know if that's of any help.
Yeah, just from the overhead, you know, to the right of house number 44, there's an old stone house with chimneys, roof, stone building. You know, I'm just wondering why it wasn't included.
Is 44 that you're referring to on the opposite side of the road from the site? So under the purposes is CTY 8, you know, that we were saying that that was a refusal, we wouldn't have been considering number 44 or anything on that side of the road. You know, there.
Just the basis of cluster, you know, 44 was mentioned as a cluster. Just wondering why the other wee house wasn't mentioned on it. But, you know,
Sorry, Councillor Maguire, could you repeat that last comment, please?
Yeah, apologies. On the basis of a cluster, you know, house number 44 is actually in the cluster of the yellow. You see the yellow circle there. But the house to the right of number 44, actually on the same street, isn't mentioned in the cluster, you know. So I was just wondering why that was, but it's not mentioned that, you know, it's.
Well, maybe just as a point of clarification, the first point of CTY 2A, you know, talks about a cluster of 4 or more buildings, you know, so it met that part of it anyway. So I don't know if it was important that a building to the side of 44 because it already met that test. I'm not sure if that's answering your question or not there.
Okay, Councillor Maguire, I think that probably does answer your question. Perhaps you think differently. If you do, feel free to say so.
No, go ahead. No, it's okay. Just 4 or more dwellings, like, you know. This is a house, you know, with it's a stone house with, you know, chimneys and all on it, but like, there's no great relevance at the minute.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Maguire. Councillor Gallagher, Paul.
Thank you, Chair. A question for the officer. Just, I'm hearing from the agent there previously, there was, you know, the applicant was possibly getting led to a decision that this would be approved and that further information was sought. At what stage did that change, Chair? You know, the applicant was saying they produced other reports, and why did it change, you know, to the sense of a refusal? What happened there that it changed, that didn't become an infill site?
Thank you, Councillor Gallagher. Good question. Did wonder that myself. So somebody wants to give you, I think Suzanne's going to provide you with the answer to that one. Thanks, Paul.
Okay. So Councillor Gallagher, following judicial review decision which we received towards the end of June in another council area, we were required to look at all our applications whereby there were being applied with the infill policy that was relevant to them. That judicial review decision is a material consideration. It does flag up issues, and the actual judge actually provides advice to decision makers, provides guidance to decision makers, and clarifies a number of points. And the fundamental point here is that the site that has been applied for does not have a common frontage with the road. Okay, it is separated from the road by the dwelling, and obviously there's a field to the west, and the field, the garden area, or part of the field around the back of number 41. So that is the fundamental issue which we could not ignore in terms of the consideration of the site. I do understand, yes, further information was submitted. However, I would advise that, anybody submitting a house in the countryside should be submitting a biodiversity checklist right from the start. And we will be dealing with those. But I do understand that that wasn't the case. The information was submitted, but we are under a duty. We cannot ignore and put this council at risk if we ignore such material considerations, and that is the purpose of bringing the application forward today as refusal.
Chair, just if I could come back just on.
Go ahead, Councillor Gallagher.
And I can understand, the planners and the tick the box exercise of going through all the policies. But do we, as decision makers here, do we, as an ours, just turn around and say that we need to treat every application as it comes individually?
I think the city solicitor is probably best placed to answer that one, Councillor Gallagher. So I'll give him a time to knock a microphone on. Philip?
I mean, the simple answer to that question is yes, each individual application needs to be treated at its own merits, because the facts in relation to each individual application are going to relate and are going to be specific to that particular case. The policies, however, do not change, and therefore you have to look at the policies in each occasion and apply the policies to that individual case and confirm that it meets. Each individual case does indeed meet those policies, and in that respect, the committee is obligated to have regard to relevant case law, relevant precedent, etc.
Thank you, Philip. Paul, you okay with that? Yep. Yep, thank you. I'm going to move on again. Alderman Kerrigan, I think that's you back in again. Go ahead, Keith.
Thank you very much, Chair, for allowing me in. Just very briefly there, Suzanne, and I see the various points that's been raised so far there, and you've answered most of the questions, to be fair. Two wee points there, and I'm just going to quote. I know the way that have we a major issue here in regards to that the site entrance is effectively, I'm looking at the map I'm looking at here, is to the east, or if the right, if you're looking at that picture of number 41. If it was coming down the other side of number 41, would that have any different bearing on some of these decisions? Are we stating that it's, because I'm noting here you're kind of stating that it's extending a urban development? I don't see that, but just querying in that one. And just a question there as well, to the west, as far as I see it here, the left of number 45, and there between that and number 47, there is there a house under construction. But is there one, or is there to be another house under construction in that parcel of ground? Maybe I'm wrong, but I had it in my head that there were two sites in there. But so just for clarification, thank you.
Councillor Karen, in relation to the access, I don't think it would matter if the access was proposed via the east, you know, that area, or was proposed through the field to, you know, between number 43 and the road. The issue here is that the site does not have a common frontage to the road. That site straddles two fields and part of a garden. It's actually physically separated, you know, from the road. It doesn't have a common frontage to the road. In relation to the house under construction, my understanding is there's only one at the moment.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that, Suzanne. And Councillor Maguire, I think you've indicated to come back. You certainly have in the chat box.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just the GR decision, could I ask what council area that was?
It was in Balnahinch, so it was the decision. I'll just get the Newry Morn.
That's okay, Chair.
It's Newry Morn Down Council.
Yeah, Chair. Based on that, Chair, if there's no more questions, could I make a proposal?
Just bear with me a wee second, Kieran. Councillor Kelly had indicated that I don't know where he wants to make a proposal or ask a question, but I clearly have to ask Councillor Kelly what he wants to do. So go ahead, Dan.
Chair, it was just a quick question for clarification to the officer.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, Councillor Kelly.
Yeah, Chair, my question is really on foot of the advice given to the committee from our legal officer there, and it's in relation to the fact that the advice coming from the judge in this judicial review that took place at the end of June, and as we've been told, issued advice to decision makers. That hasn't been circulated as far as I'm aware to committee members yet, so I haven't seen the text. But just taking the advice from our legal officer, can you just clarify a point for me in terms of that advice from the judge? Because whilst I accept policy doesn't change, does he accept that policy across the north is interpreted differently because we look at it through the lens of the area plan? And so when we look at the policy, the planning policy for rural housing in this area and this part of the district is the Strabane area plan, we are looking at it through the lens of what the Strabane area plan tells us how to interpret policy. And I'm thinking in particular of paragraph 123.2.1. Thanks, Chair.
Okay. I'd say it's probably for Philip to assess that one, Councillor Kelly.
Chair, I'm going to suggest perhaps at this moment that it may be appropriate perhaps to provide just some discussion of this matter, the legalities around this matter in committee, if that would be of assistance. It's a matter for members, but they may feel more comfortable in that respect.
In relation to the question, Councillor Kelly, the City Solicitor clearly has advised that in order to answer that question, we would have to go into confidential briefly. If you're content to do that, I'll take a proposal from you to do that.
That's proposed by me, Chair.
Okay. Anyone like to second going into confidential briefly? Councillor Mooney, thank you. Okay, for those of you who have joined us as agents, various guests and applicants, the IT department will now put you into what's called a virtual waiting room. And if you could just sit there briefly while we go into confidential. And then when we've come out of confidential, you'll be automatically invited to come back in to the meeting again. Okay, so we're just going to have to bear with it a wee second here because IT have to ensure that the only people who are clearly in discussion for the confidential business are the people who are members of this committee and council officers who are relevant to it.